What's up, everyone? Mark here from Moonlight Game Devs, back with another episode. Today, talking to Todd Mitchel. He's the creator himself. He published his own indie game. He also hosts a podcast and a blog called Code Write Play, and recently released, his first book actually, called Inside Video Game Creation, where he interviews game developers. So I hope you guys really learn a lot from this interview, really enjoy it. It was a really nice chat with him. And hope you guys enjoyed the episode. What's up, Todd? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's going very well. Just finished work. It was a pretty exhausting day. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of a real busy day here today. We're doing remote kindergarten, and I'm trying to take care of some work stuff. So pretty good. Yeah,
that sounds like a lot of work as well.
Yeah.
So you're the creator of many things around game development. So you created a game. You recently released a book about a game. You host a podcast. You do a blog. So you do a lot of really cool stuff. But can we just get started with you just telling the audience a little bit about yourself, for people who don't know you, and then
Sure. My name is Todd Mitchel. I am an indie developer and games journalist. You could consider me a freelance writer. I was in professional software for about 12 or 13 years before my son was born. My wife and I had a child. And then I got to go indie and look after my son meanwhile. So I created an indie game about 3-4 years ago now. And since that time, I've been working on freelance journalism. I run a website called codewriteplay.com, which is all game industry shop talk, things like that. I run a podcast called Game Dev Breakdown, which is part of the website. And just recently, I released my book, Inside Video Game Creation.
Yeah, interesting. I feel like a lot of people, they either start getting into software development through gaming. Was that also kind of like what happened to you as well, or?
Oh, for sure. When I was a little kid, probably about my son's age now, probably about 6 years old, I got into Nintendo, started playing Mario. I was hooked on it from the very start. So games have always been around for me. Played them with the neighborhood kids growing up. And as soon as I learned, hey, people make these games with computers, it's a whole thing. I learned everything I could about it since that time. And I've been really glad that I've been able to pursue some very cool stuff like indie game development and also, connect with other game developers and write about things that they do and, put together that book. So it's always been around my life, and that's definitely how it started.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people. And tell us about how you got started in game development as well. I know that for many people it's a different story. You started out in software development, but were you already making games at that point, or was it something that you said that you got into indie game development a bit later on, just when you got your son? How did that kind of develop into a passion of yours?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Because we're in a different age now. I'm 35 years old, just to sort of give people a frame of reference. So I'm part of a generation that, getting into software and getting into game development is so much different for people my age than it is for I'm sure my son will do it next year in first grade. I'm sure they'll do some kind of you can go to the computer lab and code and stuff. For me, I read about it in Nintendo Power back in the day and found at a yard sale. I tell a brief story about this in the book's introduction where from a yard sale, my family found an old Apple IIe from 1980, 6, something like that. We bought it for $12 or $13, brought it home. And at that same yard sale, we found one of those books, the spiral bound books full of code that you could punch in and play your own game. Well, that was my first introduction to that. So that was how I saw, what game code looked like. I had to have my mom help me with it to get it in the computer correctly. But to run that code the first time and see that game and get that experience, I was really hooked on it. I was fascinated with that. So later on at the end of high school, I was able to take one programming course, and that was enough to convince me I could absolutely do this for a career. I would love to do, just programming in general. I felt like I was okay at it. Wasn't super passionate about anything else at that time. So I ended up going from there to tech school. Excuse me. And from tech school, I I live in a part of the United States where the game industry is not really present very much. We don't have any big studios in my area, anything like that. I didn't really want to pick up and relocate to the coast or anything like that, but I did have plenty of opportunities to go to local companies. We do have a lot of IT companies in the area, so I just kind of took off with professional code, professional software, and that turned into a career that treated me really well. So, I loved that. I was grateful for that chance. But when I had a chance that, I was able to go and work on games, I wanted to jump on that, go for that. And there's my son in the background again. Okay, he's playing Burnout in the next room. That's funny. Sorry. Yeah, so the coding career treated me really well. When I had a chance to go indie, I jumped on it. And I've been so grateful for a chance to do that since that time. And, it's been just as fun to write about it. So
that's great. And like, I kind of feel the same about like what you said there is like that, even from when I started coding, and it's the same experience as like now, I couldn't even take a programming class in high school, which I would have, absolutely loved to do.
Yeah.
And, I had to teach myself a little bit of Unity here and there. Unity already existed. It wasn't nearly as powerful as it is now. And like, yeah, it's crazy. It's like seeing kids these days being able to code really soon, learning it really quickly is amazing on one hand, and being able to do all these great things is amazing. But of course, you're also a little bit like worried when you're in the industry. You're like, oh, these kids are getting better than me. So
oh yeah, it's true. Well, how did you start? Was Unity your first thing? Is that how you learned the first?
It was actually how I learned to code, or really what got me into it, and what also made me realize like, wow, like I never considered myself to be like someone who was like gifted or talented or technical in any way, but I realized that like just by really wanting to make games, I kind of realized like, oh, like I can actually do this, because wanting to make games made me just want to kind of power through learning to code, if that makes sense, or at least learning it.
It makes total sense to me, because it's funny in a way, because we as game developers get to go, I get to do something I'm passionate about. And I feel like you hear a lot of people say that, but like, who really got into accounting through some passionate activity? There are a lot of things that people are very happy doing, and they're very good at it. We need construction workers, and we need, just people from all walks of life to do all these amazing things. But who really gets to get started this way like we do, with something so fun, so exciting? Like we're very lucky in that regard, I think.
And just like you said, it definitely opened the path to, well, I'm also in software development, and I can't say that so far. I've not been working so long, but it's definitely not a path I regretted, because like you said, it's, obviously it's a line of work that, we've been very fortunate as well during the pandemic of being able to work and enjoying like a pretty comfortable lifestyle, when, unfortunately most people didn't have that privilege. So
it's
game
true.
development definitely brings a lot of great things. So yeah, absolutely.
We had more people able to adapt to quarantine and to lockdown and stuff than a lot of other fields also. So, game development is not perfect. We all know that, but boy, we've sure been lucky here lately, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to talk about like a few of your different projects as well, and like the different things that you learned on your journey. You already hinted at like Code Write Play, your blog. I've been listening to the podcast, been reading a lot of your articles. So like, how did you get into like starting that blog, and what was the kind of motivation there?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So shortly after I worked on my indie game, which was educational and focused on kids, I was kind of trying to determine like, what else can I do? I'm trying to earn some revenue from home. I'm trying to, get a little bit of a new career started. So around that time, I noticed that an editor on Twitter who worked at a website called Zam, which had a long gaming history. It used to be like a World of Warcraft thing, and it turned into different things. They wanted to go much wider, think like Kotaku or IGN. And they said, hey, we're hiring new freelancers. I've always enjoyed writing. I've always been passionate about that. I've worked on sort of geek culture blogs and stuff with friends in the past, just for fun. So I thought, it might not be so crazy. Maybe I could also do some freelance writing. So I submitted some writing samples to them. They brought me on. They allowed me to freelance for them, and I got to write several really cool things that I was very pleased with. But I thought, if I'm going to do that, I need a way to kind of promote myself in the meantime to, point people who want to see my writing, keep up with the stuff I do around the web. So I grabbed a domain and I called it Code Write Play because they were just three things I did. There were three things I liked to do: liked coding, liked writing, liked playing games. That was all very interesting to me. So I grabbed that website, and it was really just kind of going to be sort of a portfolio blog type thing. And after a while, I'd been a podcaster in the past. I thought it'd be fun to do like a companion podcast, talk about what I'm doing each week, let people keep up with me that way. So even though the freelancing kind of trailed off a little bit, I kept the website going, I kept the podcast going, and those things kind of really took off and started a life of their own. So I've worked on that ever since. The website is probably 5 years old now. The podcast is probably 3 years, going on 4 maybe. And I love it. I want to keep doing those things forever.
Yeah, I've really had like a similar experience, maybe with like a different motivation, kind of like audience building, working on like collaborating with cool people, like you said, like writing for other people. I've considered that as well. Like I'm sure you're aware of like backlink building, things like this, to kind of get more traffic to your website as well. Like working with other people, just building a reputation, like an audience, and like a name for yourself, which is important as an indie dev. I feel like these days, where
it's funny. Yeah. I kind of got lucky on my way into this because while I was trying to work my way up to like good coding jobs when I was a professional, one of the places I worked at was a startup that got bought by Network Solutions, which is a major domain registrar. They do hosting and search engine optimization, all kinds of stuff. I worked with them for like 3 years and accidentally got very well trained on search engine optimization. I did it for clients all the time. I had like 40, 45 clients at a time who would call me up. We need to get on page 1 for running shoes or whatever. Like, I want my website to show up above Nike. Just very funny stuff. And it was just a series of adventures. And the whole time I was there, I thought, this is nothing to do with coding. I would help optimize website code. So it was a little bit like I'd go through HTML and stuff. Like, we need to get these tables out. And search engines can't crawl through this. It was a whole complicated thing. But at the time, I was irritated by it. But now I'm so grateful for that time I spent because I learned a lot about what it takes to help market yourself, help you be visible on Google and stuff like that. So that turned out to be very important. And now people see that as kind of a gap. Like a lot of people don't know how to do it. So I got really lucky that I picked that up along the way.
Honestly, that's so valuable because like you said, I did the same thing. I researched, I needed to do it. I didn't get the opportunity to do it at my job, but I realized that stuff's really important. And like marketing, I did some SEO as well, like research into it. And I realized, as a developer, I mean, maybe you had this experience as well when doing like SEO, you often feel like you want to prioritize like the technical aspects of it when really they're not as important as the content aspects, if you know what I mean. Like the kind of like trying to optimize the page or whatever, that's not really as important as like actually making sure the stuff people see on your website is actually interesting, engaging, and you really only learn that by, like you said, like having the experience with a client maybe, or just working on it all day because it's just a skill for itself.
Right. I don't think of mentioning that as often as I probably should. Like when I'm making content, writing articles, doing podcasts. We've done a series of podcasts about promoting your indie game, marketing yourself, promoting yourself as a freelancer, things like that. One good takeaway for anybody listening is if you haven't, take just a day or two to read up all you can about search engine optimization, the basics of how it works. And that will treat you very well for the rest of your career, no question about it. And it is content more than it's technical stuff. You're totally right.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk a little bit about your game. You already hinted at it. Letter tabs. Hope I said that correctly. iOS and like a mobile game. One of my listeners complained that I do too many mobile developers, but. I personally prefer mobile as well a little bit, but tell us about like how that you were inspired by the game, how you got the game idea, that kind of stuff. Like, really
on the mobile front, if it helps, I've also done some contracting with a local AR and VR studio here in St. Louis, and so I can sort of speak to that also if it helps my street cred a little bit. But I get it. Like I have the same listeners, so I understand that. And I sympathize. It gets to be a little bit much after a while. But the story there is, when my son was born, I was trying to figure out, like, I had other ideas. I wanted to make games for grown-ups, needless to say. You know, I'm a gamer. I want to make games I'd like to play, of course. So, but during that first year, I don't know if anyone out there has ever tried to develop a game while taking care of a baby, like a newborn baby. It is as difficult as you're guessing. So we came to a point where, just out of like frustration with my other projects, you know, I'm always holding the kid, and I loved spending the time with him, and I don't regret a thing. But like, I also wanted to sort of give him fun little things to do. And I would like pull out mobile games and play them while we were goofing around on the couch and stuff. And I noticed that like he could pick out actions on the screen way earlier than I would have expected. I mean, we're talking like coming up on 1 year old. He can figure out like how to press a button on the screen. And I was blown away by that. And I thought, if he can do that, that alone is enough that I could make something to teach him, you know, anything I wanted, really. So what I tried one day was I put this quick prototype together using the Love 2D framework, which I still love. I'm a big fan of that because I like Lua scripting, and it just made everything very simple. So I made this little prototype, which was just like a blue background, which was supposed to be the sky. And I made a picture of a cloud that would like pop up on the screen, but it was a button and it had an alphabet letter on it. So when he pressed this alphabet button, it was like, let's say it's the letter A. My voice, I recorded these sounds with my wife. We recorded ourselves saying like the alphabet, numbers 1 through 10, actually 25, I think, and so on. And they would, a kid could press the button and hear A, and then the letter B would pop up. So, and he loved it. Like, that was all he needed. He was thrilled by this. And using that technique, I was able to go through the entire lowercase alphabet, uppercase alphabet, numbers 1 through 25, all in these different levels that had animations and things going on in the background and stuff. I composed music for it myself. I'm a little bit of a musician from back in the day. And he learned from that exceedingly well. And as an adult, you think like, that sounds boring. Of course, it's boring for us adults, but like, kids love repetition. That's a big difference between kids and adults. We don't want repetition. We want new, exciting things every time we play a game. Kids are the exact opposite. They insist on repeating things the same way over and over again, day after day. It's why everybody hates the movie Frozen. It's why, you know, Disney movies drive everybody nuts, because their kids want to do it over and over and over again. Well, yeah, we can use that to our advantage to teach kids stuff. And I threw two additional levels on the game. One was kind of a quiz where, you know, I don't call it a quiz, but I'd put up different letters and go, hit the letter B, find the letter C, find the number 15. And I discovered that kids were able to learn with this very, very effectively. So it didn't make a killing. We didn't take over, you know, Daniel Tiger's space in the App Store or anything like that. But it performed very well. Parents were happy with it. The kids loved it. So it was very satisfying to me. I was super excited to have my first commercial game out. And from there, it's just, you know, I've wanted to do more game projects. But by this time, you know, I got the website, the podcast, one game to support and everything. And I'm looking to get back into it soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, like, I mean, I can totally relate to that situation where, like me as well, I love doing the podcast. Probably one of my favorite things to do, just talk to cool people, network. I think it's a really great thing about a podcast is also like the secret advantage, I guess, about podcasting is you just get to like interview people. You get to, on one hand, like exchange with them, kind of give them the, you know, benefit of it's just a little bit of exposure. They get a backlink maybe for their project or whatever, get like people to look at it as well. But you also get that connection and like finding out more information about a topic you're really interested in. There's so many reasons why I love podcasting. And of course, it takes away from the time I have to make a game, for example.
Right.
Yeah, it's always a trade-off, I think, especially like even stuff like posting on Twitter every day, which people recommend in the indie game community, is really hard, at least for me. Like, I do not know what to post every day.
Yeah, there are many days my podcast account sits quietly and, you know, people notice, I get it, but I'm just like you. It's like, it's all time. Eventually you only have so many minutes during the day. And this is really one of the only downsides of the podcast, because I feel like it's a rare situation where everybody wins. The guests get something from it. The listeners enjoy hearing from the guests. You get to fill some content. Like, I think it's a fantastic activity. I'm very sorry for all the podcasters who are discouraged because they don't feel like their show is taken off well enough. Like, it's a marathon, not a sprint, is the best way I can describe it. Like, it takes a long time, but if there are other podcasters listening, because I feel like usually they do listen to the different shows and stuff, but keep in mind, people do listen even if they're not reaching out. It's not you'll have to tell me if you have a different experience, but I find that it's not a super high feedback activity, even when the numbers are up. When I get like good listens, good downloads, I know people are rating and reviewing it and stuff. Like, the average episode, nobody says a word. But if I don't record the next week, somebody will go, "Oh, hey, I noticed you didn't do a show." So they're out there and enjoying it. You just have to be very comfortable and very confident that it's going out there. Like, it is usually doing well. It just doesn't always feel like it.
I mean, yeah, I've had that exact same experience. Like, I think the most important thing is, like, when it comes to podcasting, is just do some, like, speak about something that you could just speak about naturally. Like, just make it, speak to people that you would naturally just find very interesting, and you feel like if you met them somewhere. Like, that's why I love doing indie game development podcasts. If I met someone just like in a group, like at a party, at just a social gathering, and I found out they're making an indie game, like, I want to know everything that they're doing. You know what I mean? I would just naturally do it. And I feel like if you then just add a microphone, like, then it's something you could just share with people. And I feel like a lot of people just enjoy that, and they get hopefully useful information or entertainment out of it. So that's like how I like to think about it.
Right. I think that's exactly the key. You have to set it up in such a way that it's something fun that you enjoy doing. I mean, almost anything that you set up, there are going to be days you don't feel like doing it, whether it's, exercise or playing a sport that you enjoy or anything. Some days you're not going to feel like it. But if you set up podcasting like, this is really just a call with a new friend or an old friend, maybe a co-host or something. It's a way for you to connect with people. It's good for you. It's good for the other people. And I think you're exactly right. Like, if it's something that you can look at, like, I would want to be doing this anyway, whether the microphone was there or not. Then it's a winner. Like, if you're forcing it and it's about something you're not passionate about, like, of course it's going to feel bad and it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, like, that's a great tangent back to indie game development, which is like when you were building your game, I'm sure that there were probably some challenges or moments where you felt like maybe a little bit less motivated to work on it, or felt like some pressure to work on it. How did you maybe power through those moments? Like, I feel like pretty much all game developers go through it. And if you didn't, then I'd also love to know, like, how you prevented that, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny, and this is sort of a topic that's like so present in my life all the time that it's really heavily represented in the book. Like, the book is like Q&A interviews with 12 people in the game industry at all different points, like indie, professional, and everything. And something I asked everybody was like, gauge your passion for me, explain how you stay motivated, especially those indies. Indies don't have a boss breathing down their neck. They don't necessarily have dates they have to meet. Some are working with publishers. That's a whole different thing. But the motivation topic is just really interesting, because before I was a parent and before I was even married, when I was just doing this stuff for fun on my own, I never got anywhere close to releasing a game, which is kind of strange if you think about it. Like, I was still passionate about it. I still wanted to, like, really have a go at this. Like, I would have loved to be an indie developer much sooner in my life than I was. But it wasn't until I was taking time away from my family. And of course I was still present and trying to keep things going around the house and support the people around me and everything. But I realized how precious my time was. And that made a big difference for me. Long after the project stopped being like super fun and super exciting, like, consider the last, I don't know, quarter, maybe the last fifth of your game project, where you're dealing with stuff like exporting to the hardware and testing on, your iPhone or your Android phone. You're doing those submissions and dealing with all those errors you get back from the app stores and stuff. That stops being fun and exciting. The finish line is close, and that's a big deal. But also, you're dealing with very technical stuff. You're trying to fix things that aren't your fault. In my case, like I said, I love the Love 2D framework, but it would have been a lot smarter for me to do that in Unity because I'm a Unity guy. But I was like, oh, I want to code. I want to have my hands under the hood. I want to really do this from scratch. I feel like most coders eventually go like, I want to do this from scratch myself. I think that was a mistake, honestly. Unity would have made the end of my project much easier. And so instead, I'm dealing with like memory leaks on the iPhone and stuff. I have no idea what to do about that. The guy who wrote the library wrapper that it's hard to even explain, but like I had a memory leak in my game that was an absolute showstopper. I had to figure out what to do about that. That wasn't fun, but I had to realize like, this is time I'm not, jingling a toy in front of my baby. This is time that I'm not sitting with my wife and talking to her about how her job is going that she works so hard at so we can do all this. It becomes an issue of motivation. And that's not to say everybody has to have a family to do this. Of course not. But you have to be able to have very clearly in your mind set out why you're doing what you're doing. I feel like compartmentalizing your tasks is a very big deal. So if you can really break down exactly the single thing you need to focus on right now, and you can make them small, bit by bit by bit, you will definitely get across the finish line. It's just, you have to remind yourself, I don't want to be somebody who's not officially a published game developer anymore. I did this recently with the book too. Like I always wanted to be an author. I always wanted to have a book out. I'm tired of not being an author. You have to be tired of not being done yet. I think it's all mindset, and it's all just day after day. Like, what's going to get me to the finish line? I know it sounds very generic, but it's absolutely true. Like, you have to really get yourself in that mind frame that I'm sick of not being done yet.
Yeah. Is that what you kind of meant in your, like, I read an article that you wrote about like the game development workflow of just kind of like being, focused and having that focus as well? Are you like a to-do list guy who writes down the night before what he needs to do the next day? I found that to be pretty good.
Yeah, to some degree I am. I think it's probably a product of being a professional software developer on teams and stuff for many years. But I'm a big task board guy like Trello or any of those types of it doesn't have to be Trello, but it can be sticky notes on your wall. Anything that will let you break down your tasks. And again, that's for me, even though I'm just a solo developer now, that really helps me focus on the one thing I need to do, because my mind will wander. I'll think like I've got automation issues, or I need to write some tests for this. I need to check out this, I need to look at the next Unity update and decide whether I should upgrade or not. But no, right now I need to fix this one bug. And I think that's important. So I am big on to-do lists. I'm big on task boards in my stuff. I love that Git just added project boards you can use. So between that and Trello, I'm a big advocate for that stuff. If you want to get like really into it, you can read about the Kanban technique. That's a productivity thing. There are books out about that and stuff. I don't think it has to be that complicated. Just have those, to do, in progress, and done columns, and move stuff back and forth. I'm a big fan of that.
I am too. I think it's a great way. I feel like it's also good. I read about a technique that a YouTuber I like shared. He talked about like that he's got like two personas. He's got the employee and the entrepreneur. So during the day, he's the employee. He's got his task that needs to be done. Like, and if the employee has like some idea, some like thing dangling in front of his head, something that he wants to do or a cool idea he wants to try, he can only write it down. Because at night, the entrepreneur or his boss comes and he looks at what the employee has done and he writes down the tasks he needs to do. So it's kind of like a golem kind of approach to that thing. I thought it was really cool. But I feel like it's kind of like another approach. Like there's so many approaches to kind of getting in the flow and getting really focused on getting the right things done. So I feel like that kind of stuff I could talk about for hours as well. I think it's really
I know, right? Like in the corporate environment, that's what they call like the different hats. Put on your project manager hat and now put on your QA hat. It sounds funny, but to some degree, I get the value of that. Yeah, I totally get it.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, and I think for indie developer, when you're like you said, you're trying to reach some big goal that's not going to be like in your reach for the presumably even months or even years, then you really do need to break it down and make sure you're constantly working towards it.
That's been a big goal of my podcast, honestly, because I do a lot of episodes where I interview people. And because, I always want to bring knowledge from someone else who's smarter and better than me at something to my audience. Because, who am I at the end of the day? But if I always think, like, if there's anything I can offer, yeah, I was on professional teams for a long time where I was, again, with smarter and more professional people. And all the time I think of lessons that, like, when I was on a team and we really worked well, here's how we did, task analysis, or here's how we like managed our time, planned for the future. So when I'm not interviewing somebody, I do a lot of episodes where I try to break down those lessons that I sort of took away from that environment. I think people get a lot out of that, and it's definitely something I like to hear about also.
Yeah, I'm doing it the same way. Pretty much like this is the same situation, I guess, because especially when it comes to like, I'm in no position really to teach anyone about game development because I'm just learning as well. I think is another benefit, right? It's like you speak to people, you get to ask the questions you would love to ask anyway, because you're just trying to learn, like a benefit of podcasting.
That's one of the best parts, right? Like I was listening to Judd Apatow talk about comedy. So, it had nothing to do with game development, but he said almost the same thing. He said when he was first starting out, he interviewed, and I think he said he was in high school still, but in New York City, he interviewed every comedian who would speak to him. And through that process, first of all, he ended up getting to write a book that way, full of very famous comedians when he was still a kid. But then he also, of course, absorbed those lessons himself and then became a very famous, comedian and writer and movie director and stuff, and did very well. So I think that kind of transcends game development and goes into just, a great way to go through life. Be curious and ask people questions about things that you want to learn, and just take that info and run with it.
Yeah, is that also what kind of inspired your book? Because you interviewed, like, I think it was 12 developers, 12 experts in the games industry. You've also got like a lot of experience just interviewing people in general because of your podcast as soon as well. And I would love to know, like, how do you get into those positions of like connecting with game developers, learning from them? Like, what is your kind of approach there? Because I have mine, but
yeah,
I'd love to.
It's so wild, right? Because we started these things from absolutely nothing. We just went, I'd like to talk about games, or I'd like to present things about games to other people. I came up as soon as I was old enough to know that this kind of thing existed. I was reading books from like Masters of Doom was a really good one, where authors will go super deep with studios for years, and it's something incredible that I don't know if I'll ever get to do. But Blake J. Harris is another one, when he wrote Console Wars and spent years working on that. There's so many good authors who have just sort of captured these super deep stories that go on at studios and in the industry in general. And I thought, I love reading this stuff so much. Maybe I could, add something to that same bookshelf. And at this time, like, we were probably a few months into the pandemic, and I had been doing the podcast for years already. And I had captured a set of interviews that I thought, these are standouts for me, all for different reasons, but they all capture things that I'm worried people missed to some degree. Podcasts have good listenerships in this focus area of game development, but I thought I would love to sort of circle back with some of these developers. I would love to maybe transcribe some of this stuff. And that's what it is. I never tried to hide that at all or anything, but these are transcriptions and edits of interviews I did for the podcast. In all but one circumstance. There was one chapter where it was just brand new, had never been released anywhere. But so I transcribed 70, 80,000 words of interviews, and I got very good at that. I learned all about transcription, believe me. But I edited these things down and then went back to these developers and said, like, I'd love for you to look this over, clarify anything that needs to be clarified. In several cases, some very prominent developers added to what we had already talked about, which was fantastic. David Fox was such a good sport, and he was probably the most well-known person in the book. He'd worked on, Maniac Mansion, Thimbleweed Park, all this stuff. He goes way back. He's seen it all. And he was probably the one who went the furthest out of his way to go, I love this. I read this. I've got thoughts on this. He added a short bit for the end of the thing. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I thought, I can turn this into something that can expand the reach of these people who spent their time and were so generous with me and so kind to me. Like, I would love to push that out to even more people. And so far it's worked. I mean, the book is doing fairly well. New people are discovering stories that I found fascinating. The book is not interesting because of me in the slightest. It's all because of these awesome people who took their time to tell their stories about going through the game industry, starting in their basements or starting, in some cases, leaving college and going straight to places like, Gearbox and stuff like that. So everybody had a fantastic story for a totally different reason. So once I had the idea, I kind of couldn't get it out of my head. So I was lucky to have the time. I was lucky that, nobody was lucky that the pandemic was here, but I was lucky that I was already in a position that I had a pretty good, office set up. I've got things worked out here at home. Like, I was going to be here either way. And so I was able to use some of that time to really polish that up, put it all together. Yeah, again, I couldn't have done it without the cooperation of 12 different people. And in fact, one person, I transcribed their whole chapter, and he got back to me at the last minute and said, I want nothing to do with this book. That's something I haven't talked about very much, but that's a little behind the scenes for you. Like, one person, I went, hey, I didn't hear from you earlier. I've got your chapter done. I'd love to give you plugs or, let the audience know where to find you or whatever. He goes, I don't work at that studio anymore. I want nothing to do with this.
Right.
So I had to respect that. I guess I didn't have to, but out of respect for that person, I said, okay, I'll pull it and I won't put it in the book. But that was 9,000 words of the book gone in an instant. Yeah. And I found somebody else who wanted to take part in it. It was a giant process. People do stuff like this and they go if I had known it was going to be this hard, I would not have done it. I don't feel that way. I may do another one of these next year. I have no idea. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. I mean, a lot of the people listening probably know more or less or are about to find out how hard it is to make a game, but how long did it take you to kind of make a book? And can you give us a guesstimate of the amount of hours you put into it? I'd be really curious to know.
Yeah, what's funny is my indie game and my book took very similar amounts of time. So when I went from prototype to fully fleshed game for my indie game, that I shot for 4 months and probably took about 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And that was very close to how the book ended up also. The book probably ultimately took about 7 months, maybe just over the 8-month mark. And doing it by myself probably saved some time. If I had shopped around to try to get a publisher interested, see, what's funny is you talked about, having connections through the podcast. By the time I was ready to publish my own book, I was regularly talking to Simon & Schuster, Addison Wesley, a number of really big publishers who might have been willing to think about this book because we talked about Jason Schreier earlier and his very successful books. I mean, the industry understands that game development books do have a place in the market. People are very receptive to them. I could have maybe worked something out, but I thought, I'm indie in games. Let's be indie in authorship. So right when I was done, I spent an extra week or two in publishing and I was able to seal the deal and be done with it. So really positive experience overall. And it's not done. I'm still talking to people about the book. And there's we may get to do 1 or 2 more related products. I can't exactly say what's going on, but I may get to announce something here soon about the book. So it's been very exciting.
Exciting. Yeah. Really exciting. So, you said that, you did all this stuff and so I would love to know what's next for you? Are you going to continue down the indie game developer route, the author route? Is there something that you're kind of planning for the not too distant future as well? Or?
I mean, I'm so lucky to get to do what I do, and I'm so grateful for it every day. And I get to live my life in such a way that I sort of finish something like this and I think like, what would I just like to do next? I'm definitely. I mentioned earlier I do some contract AR and VR work occasionally. I'm probably going to pick up some more of that here soon. I've been in talks with that studio. The guy who runs it is a friend of mine now, and so I may be doing that to sort of pull in a little bit of steady income and help out around here. But also, I would like to check that box and make a game for grown-ups at some point. I've got several ideas of things that I would love to do that I don't know of any games like them. So that may be something I try. There are some other writing projects I'm interested in. I would love to write something sort of less serious. Would be a lot of fun to sort of do something maybe comedy themed or just to make things interesting, some kind of fictional project. So I'm kind of bouncing between those ideas of maybe a grown-up game, some kind of book that's more along the lines of just, have fun reading this and you don't have to take away too many life lessons, but just have a good time. So I was still considering that. So it's probably going to be one of those.
Interesting. Like one thing that would really interest me that I thought was I noticed that and I thought like a kind of a light bulb went on my head is when you said like that when you showed your son the prototype where it was with your and your wife's voices of saying the letters. I don't know if you're familiar with like this AI that can emulate voices. So creating like an app. Yeah, creating like an app that can do it, but use the parents' voices. This would be, I think, really, really cool idea as well. Just to realize it because it could be that was actually like what made the kid like would lead to like even higher enjoyment of the kids of the game, if that makes sense.
It's true, and I don't think I had heard of anything like this when I finished that game. The first time I had seen one of these that really blew my mind was only a few weeks ago. Something else when you get into podcasting and website stuff, you start to hear from PR people. I don't know if you have too many PR people who hound you about stuff yet, but it's coming if they don't. But one of my regular PR contacts sent me an email like, hey, would you be interested in talking to this guy who made this software suite for game developers where he'll like sell you basically time. It's rendering time. So if you want to do like 20 minutes worth of voiceover from these AI voices, it costs, X amount of dollars, and it's pretty cheap. Like it seemed pretty affordable. And I went through some of the demos and they blew my mind. I could not believe that was generated by this software. So we are definitely at a point where we're just about to the point where you can do VO where I would have no idea that a real person hadn't recorded it. So
we're close. It's incredible.
You say that and it kind of makes me wonder, like, I don't know how much setup there would be to do like a new voice for something like that. I bet it takes a lot of work, but if you were able to sort of harness that technology and do game projects with it, it would just be incredible. And I'm sure the first big head turner projects are very, very near on the horizon for stuff like that. And I hope people use it responsibly because that is powerful stuff.
It is. Have you heard of Descript to edit your podcast? It lets you edit your podcast with AI, and you can also it does that. It lets you emulate your voice, and you can write out some text, and it says the voice. It inserts it into your podcast. It's crazy, man. It's crazy stuff, man. And it works pretty quickly. So that's tempting. It's tempting, and I think we're already almost there. Like you said, like we're gonna maybe have people's voices in game, and I had an idea as well where you could do that, like with you could translate a person's to a voice like to another language, and they like their character says it in the other language when you're in like Arma or whatever, like some kind of like that game. That kind of stuff I think is going to be in the future, in our future as well. It's really
that's a smart use case for that, is to have those on the fly translations based on circumstances in the game. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think like a lot of this stuff, there's exciting times in terms of game technology for sure.
We're going to have to deal with competing podcasts where the host isn't even real.
You think so?
Isn't that strange?
Maybe I am already. What if I'm just an AI podcaster right now speaking to you?
The joke would be on me, and that would be a great story for the future. Like, I went on this podcast, found out the guy wasn't even real.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I feel like people are probably experimenting with that. I've heard of AI journalists who send out interview questions to people. I heard a podcast where the guy said he was doing that. Like he did a little bit of personal intervention, but mainly the AI was interviewing people with like emails.
What a time! What a time we live in.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Funny.
Yeah. There was one more question that I had earlier, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I forgot what it was. Sorry about that.
No, totally.
It's been really cool learning a lot about your kind of current projects, all the stuff that I've learned from you, all the things that like experiences we shared as well with podcasting and such.
Yeah.
Like, is there any like, I guess, closing statements that you would like to just like knowledge that you would like to wrap up with about, building your game that you might want to pass on to anyone who's maybe not built a commercial game yet? Like things that you feel like is like the most important thing to focus on, I guess.
My number one piece of advice for people is that you should not let fear keep you from doing anything. And that goes mainly for people who haven't started yet. People come to me all the time going like, I would love to learn game development, or my son or daughter would love to learn game development. We don't know where to start. I'm having them read all these books and stuff. And I love books. I love books about code and development and every sort of thing you can imagine. But if it's keeping you from starting, instead put it down, dive in. You will learn as you go. Like I really encourage people to get their hands dirty with stuff. If that applies to you and you're in between phases of your project, you have a new thing that you haven't done yet before. Maybe you need to compose some music for your game and you haven't tried that before. Get started. That's the best thing you can do. In the end, we almost all learn this as we go. Nobody just reads 10, 20 books and then they have all the know-how that they need. It's always the best thing to dive in as fearlessly as possible. People are around you who can help you. Just don't let anything keep you from acting on what you want to do.
Great words to end it on. So that was Todd Mitchel. Check out Code Right Play. Check out Inside Video Game Creation, everyone. It's on Amazon, I guess. Anywhere else where they can get the book, or places you want them to check out. Maybe your Twitter or...
Yeah, Amazon is the main one for the book because that's who I published through. If you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'm there way too much. And my username is MechaTodzilla with 1 D and 2 L's. And I'm always happy to talk shop with people and sort of hear what they're doing as well. That's a way to find me, and I love spending my time that way.
Cool. Thanks for coming on the show, man. It was really good.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Hey guys, Mark here from Moonlight Game Devs. Just a quick reminder, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a like or subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. It really helps me out a lot. It shows me that you guys like the content. And hopefully you guys have a great week.